Hello and welcome to Connect and Collaborate. I am Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer, and I am really excited to start today's show. But before we do that, I'm going to ask my audience out there to please visit cobert.com. That's COBRT.com. You can sign up for our newsletter there, check out all of our radio shows on our radio podcast page, and be sure to check out our events page. One of the things that we're super passionate about here is workforce development, which leads me to my guests that I have joining me by phone. I have Sandy Husk, who is CEO of AVID, as well as Dr. Lee Vargas, Executive Vice President at AVID. And AVID is an actual acronym, and that is Advancement via Individual Determination. So how are you, Sandy? Thank you so much for joining us.
We are doing just great, and we're honored to be participating with you and looking forward to the Workforce Development Soft Skills conversation coming up in Colorado soon.
Yes, absolutely. And how are you doing, Dr. Lee Vargas?
Oh, ditto. Just thankful for the opportunity to be able to share with the audience some of the exciting things that are happening in the AVID world.
Cool. So I want to start here with a little bit of background from both of you as far as what made you decide to get into this workforce development space. So Sandy, I'll start off with you.
So Lee and I both had been superintendents in the past, and so we had firsthand knowledge of the impact on students and educators and students' families, quite frankly. And it's always impressive to see the academic impact it has on students. But when you've been using AVID for many, many years, it's very easy and quick to see how students feel better about themselves, the way they show up into the room, all of the things that are really being described by businesses around soft skills. So I would say as an educator and a leader, I saw the value of it before I came to AVID. And then as the businesses have made it more and more apparent that there is a soft skills gap and it's a place that they would like educators to focus, it was a natural for us to enter that conversation.
I feel the same way when you think about education being the backbone of our democracy and all the policy shifts that we've seen all centered around education and really preparing students for the workforce, and the importance of the public education in terms of creating a literate and civic society that can compete in the economy of the day is really critical.
It is very critical, and that's one thing Colorado Business Roundtable is pleased to work on, is making sure that we have solid businesses working on making sure that policy changes actually happen and go into motion. A lot of people, I imagine, in government maybe don't have education backgrounds like yourselves, right? And so they don't see the ins and outs and every day of schooling and how it relates to working in the field.
Correct.
So let's talk about AVID itself. As I mentioned, it's Advancement via Individual Determination. How did we get from that acronym to AVID, and where are you today?
So it started with our founder, Mary Catherine Swanson, back in the 80s. She was an English teacher at Claremont High School, and the San Diego Unified School District was going through a busing forced desegregation plan. And so Claremont High School, which from the neighborhood had traditionally had mostly white, middle to upper income students, through the busing program now had an influx of students coming out of school areas that had less opportunity. And a lot of them were African American and Latino, several non-English speaking. And so the teachers were not necessarily prepared with how to help these particular students. And Mary Catherine was not happy just by saying, I don't know what to do. So she decided to study it. And she went on to college campuses and actually found students who looked like the new students in her classroom and asked them what they needed to be successful. And they described many of the things that are the heart and the essence of AVID today. And that is how to be organized, how to present yourself, how to frame a debate, how to study, how to get help from adults, and probably one of the most valuable things is what to do when you don't understand something. How can you use your peers and your mentors to help you navigate in a place that you weren't used to being? And so from that time, the results were so overwhelmingly positive in her classroom that it quickly spread across the county and then across the state of California. And of course, now we are a national nonprofit with a footprint in almost every state in the United States, and including several countries, mostly through our Department of Defense schools.
Several countries you mentioned. That is interesting, considering that we know most countries don't follow the same type of schooling.
Yes, of course, the Department of Defense schools are working with the Department of Defense. It's the Department of Defense Education Agency, I believe. We refer to it as DoDEA. And so we have a contract with them to serve those children of military people, regardless of where they're based.
That is fascinating. I love that you're working with them. That definitely would expand your horizons. Let's talk about this soft skills gap specifically. We mention a skills gap quite a bit on this show, but the soft skills, what does that mean?
Well, basically, those skills that are personalized and self-presentation and needed in order to work effectively with others. And so one of the great things about AVID is that through the AVID experience, kids get to learn about teamwork and collaboration, how to think critically, solve problems. Organization is a big part of AVID. Leadership and that work ethic and persistence, critical thinking and creativity, obviously. And so all of those combine to really develop those types of relationships to be able to work effectively in teams and solve problems. And when you think about that, and you think about some of the research, 92% of executives value those soft skills as much as they do the technical skills. And 82% of them say they have a very difficult time finding employees with those desired soft skills. And AVID provides students with those experiences, which is not unlike educators. Educators also rank problem solving as probably the number one skill that's important for young people. And then following that, collaboration and persistence. So I think both in education and in business, those are skills that are highly valued. And I remember when I was a teacher many years ago, working with high school students, what we found is in the businesses that we were working with and students' jobs, that 9 out of the 10 people that lost their jobs didn't lose them because they didn't have the skills. So they couldn't get along with other people. They couldn't work in teams. So AVID provides a tremendous opportunity to prepare kids not only for a more rigorous educational experience and college and career readiness, but for the workforce and the skills that are badly needed today in today's workforce.
Yes, I would definitely agree with you on that. These skills are skills that I think a lot of us that have been in the workforce for a while tend to take for granted, right? Especially the time management and the critical thinking aspect of it. Once you get set into a career, you kind of lose track of why you needed those skills. But for those entering the workforce, those are very important skills to have.
We totally agree, which is why we've been doing what we've been doing for as many years as we've had, and also very committed to continuing to learn from the business leaders and the higher education leaders who are looking at students who've been in AVID for several years. They now have them in the workforce and in higher education, and giving us feedback on what we can even do more to strengthen our work with educators.
Yes. Well, let's talk about who's impacted by this gap. As we know, Lee, you mentioned that 9 out of 10 people were losing jobs because they didn't have these skills. So obviously there's a deficit for the students in this, but who else is impacted by this gap? I would imagine there's some businesses, maybe our economy is losing out on some money. How is that impacting us?
I think you're right. I think students are by far the group that probably misses out the most, and especially when we talk about equity and making sure we provide access for all students regardless of their background. That is what we are passionate about at AVID. But as previously to our position today, Lee and I both had several decades as superintendents in multiple states throughout the United States. So we had a lot of opportunities to relate to business leaders and corporations and policymakers. And it was clear that as they would speak with us, that even getting past the interview process, as Lee said earlier, if the student didn't have the soft skills, then they may not be the best fit for that company. And of course, that has an economic impact on the community and on the business. It also has a discouraging impact on the employee who just entered the organization and wanted to do a good job. So we believe when there's a strong partnership between the education and the businesses and the policymakers, that's the best of all worlds.
I absolutely agree with you, and it's one of the reasons that Colorado Business Roundtable wanted to work with you on this program that you've got going around the country. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the second segment. But before we do that, obviously, AVID's main focus is working on this skills gap. What are some specific things that we're doing? Are we getting legislation passed? What kind of statistics do we have behind this?
Well, actually, the key in these partnerships is really central. I think that, for example, being able to work with private industry to be able to help visualize students into what the workplace is really like and the skills needed is really key. And having students and integrating some of those work experiences for real life into the instructional experience is also key. And I think that's one of the things that AVID does really well. Sandy mentioned earlier about some of those skills, but as part of the AVID experience, being able to really organize the work, to be able to work in teams, to be able to solve problems, but then to also see how you apply those in a work environment are really key. And when you think about the Every Student Succeeds Act, which is the federal policy umbrella, if you will, that is part of every state's educational plan, there's a set of metrics there that they look at using to be able to determine the effectiveness when it comes to ultimately, obviously, graduation and preparation for college to career. And one of the great things about AVID is it meets a lot of those metrics and provides the experiences for students to be able to meet those, whether it's taking more AP classes. Our data is pretty powerful that shows that students who go through AVID are not only are college ready at higher rates than non-AVID students, and that's true for every student subgroup, but they also enroll in college and persist from year to year as well as graduate. And so when you think about the AVID effect and its advantage and the ability for our students to be able to go into the workforce with those skills is a real boost. And there's a number of examples, and coming up now at the Colorado Roundtable, we'll be sharing and talking about that. But one example is in Inglewood Public Schools, AVID and CTE work together to align the post-secondary student success to the 15 different industry sectors that CTE has. In fact, if you think about Every Student Succeeds Act, over half of the states have in their plans a requirement that students take CTE courses. So with AVID partnering with CTE in those 15 CTE industry sectors, it provides a tremendous opportunity and boost to those students and those companies that are out there today. So it makes it really relevant to not only the student, but the workforce.
Yes, it definitely makes it relevant all the way around. What kind of feedback are you getting from your educators on this? Are they thrilled to see this happening? As you have said earlier, Sandy, both you and Lee come from an educational background, and so there's definitely more passion coming from that because you've seen where the skills gap is. But are your students and your educators both giving you good or bad feedback on this?
They're probably our biggest advocates. We laugh and say they are avid about AVID. So students, you'll get to meet some students if you go to the Roundtable. The students are the most articulate at explaining what it was they needed emotionally, what they needed academically, and what the vision is for the future, because having relationships with these great educators helps them dream bigger and accomplish those dreams. And Lee mentioned this, but when he said the students in all subgroups, that means it doesn't matter what background they come from in terms of race or socioeconomic status or level of college education or support from the home. And all of those students are coming from homes, we hope and believe that they're very, very well loved by their families, but the families may not have what they need to be sure that kids get those resources. When the students can be empowered themselves and they feel a partnership with the educators to do that, they will often tell you, this not only impacted my life, it's impacting the whole life of my family.
And we hear that a lot from our students. And when you think about the individual subgroups and the demographic shifts that are occurring in our country and the increased standards and levels of rigor that are necessary to be able to compete in a knowledge and global economy that's unfolding before our eyes, we hear from students some incredible stories of how AVID really gave them a belief system, gave them a family, gave them the skill sets to be able to master rigorous content. So it's really inspiring to hear those. Plus, we have a lot of research over the 40 years of the power of the AVID effect. In fact, we were just looking at some research that shows, because keep in mind that when you think about the 2.2 million students out there that we're serving right now, probably around 3/4 or more come from low-income homes. But when you look at the outcomes of students, those low-income students perform as well or better than middle and high-income students. And so when you look at the research around AVID, and that there is no achievement gap, Sandy was mentioning the subgroups. When you look at whether you're Asian, Black, or Hispanic, Latino, or poverty, 92% and above of all of those students meet college entrance requirements. They all enroll at higher rates and succeed at higher rates in college than non-AVID students. I want to underscore that's true for all of those subgroups.
Alex, I think you're aware that I was an educator in Colorado for well over 2 decades, and I was a superintendent in Adams County 1 from 96 to about 2001. And what I found when you asked about educators and their motivation, I never, ever had a complaint from a teacher about participating in AVID events, because the students will change their perspective if their perspective needs any changing, and if not, it just reinforces what they already knew and the passion of what gets all teachers into education. Just in Colorado alone, in the 150 AVID sites we have, 99% of the students in those schools are graduating from high school, and 81% of them were accepted into institutions of higher education. And then the schools are also very successful at connecting students to internships and experiences. And teachers like to see students succeed, and especially high school teachers where the stakes are so high because the kids are leaving, the end of their K-12 career. And so when they get students turning around and saying, this is what it did for me, it will sell itself.
Yeah. I would just add, too, that 99% also of those AVID students in Colorado graduate from high school. Their average high school GPA is 3.1. 99% of them took an SAT or an ACT test, and 85% applied to a four-year university. So the data is pretty solid, and that's consistent pretty much across every state in terms of the power of the AVID effect.
Those are some phenomenal numbers that you have going on there. I love hearing that. And Sandy, to roll off what you said, I imagine that people mostly get into the education field to make sure that they're making an impact on those kids, right? That's the whole point of getting into that career, is to be able to make that change and make sure our future is secure through educating these kids. You mentioned that there are no achievement gaps, Lee. I absolutely love that. I imagine this is probably what George W. Bush was thinking when he put in the No Child Left Behind Act, was kind of this getting everybody on an even playing field so that they all have the same opportunities. But what you guys are doing is making that attainable. We have roughly 4 minutes left in this segment, but I'd love to discuss a little bit of that, the no achievement gap.
Well, certainly, when you think of historically what's happened in this country, the AVID effect and the AVID strategies and the AVID elective and those schools that go school-wide see a very different outcome than those without AVID. And I think it's very timely because, when you think about the purpose that we talked about and the workforce needs, and Washington is a good example. The Washington Business Roundtable did an analysis of job openings just between now and 2021, and they've set a target of having because 70% of the jobs or more are going to require at least a bachelor's degree. But they're looking at, and 2021 is not that far away, they're looking at 700,000 job openings just in Washington. So to have a workforce that can fill those and compete and secure America's democracy and our economy is a national interest.
You don't need to remind me that 2021 is not that far away. But that you are speaking volumes there, sir. 700,000 jobs just in Washington alone will have those openings. And getting this workforce ready is a task in and of itself, as it has been for many years in the education field. That being said, with technology coming about, there's always going to be more jobs that we don't know will need to be filled. With technology changing. We have roughly 2 minutes left here in this segment. I want to talk a little bit before we go to break on how businesses and educators are working together specifically to ensure that we're getting the right workforce out there.
Well, and I'll give you one prime example from Oregon, but I think the fact that the Colorado Roundtable is even calling this convening and supporting educators and policymakers is huge. But a specific example is the Nike School Innovation Fund in Oregon, who had traditionally invested in the school districts that are closest to where Nike sits, Portland, Beaverton, and Hillsborough. They made a decision about 4 years ago to expand across the state and to invest in high school reform. And they provided support along with the school district and AVID to be sure that at least 50 high schools were getting good quality AVID implementations. As that moved forward, it gave a great opportunity for policymakers to understand their role in supporting that kind of educational reform and that kind of professional learning support for educators. Another example is in other states where these roundtables are happening and where they're bringing policymakers in and saying, like Wisconsin, we've got a workforce development problem. We need to figure out how to re-engage our youth in staying in Wisconsin and working with us in these great careers that are available. The last thing I would say is that AVID has responded by being sure that we have digital teaching and learning embedded into a separate way that we teach teachers so that they know what the tools are that are available. And now we're pulling those digital teaching and learning practices into our career tech strands, our science strands, our math strands, and strands are the mini courses that we offer teachers. So many, many successes and a whole lot more room to grow, which is why we're so enthusiastic about this conversation.
We are enthusiastic as well. We're going to take a quick break here on Connect and Collaborate, so be sure to stay with us. In the meantime, be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube page while you're here. Find this podcast and more at cobrt.com/radio-podcast. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to Connect and Collaborate. Once again, I am Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer, and we are talking workforce development. Specifically, we're actually talking about this soft skills gap that we need to close across the nation, but also particularly here in Colorado, we are facing that issue. And once again, to remind our audience, we have on the phone with us Dr. Lee Vargas. He is the Executive Vice President of AVID, and Sandy Husk, the CEO of AVID. And as we said in the first segment, AVID stands for Advancement via Individual Determination, which speaks volumes. I really like that acronym, and AVID is such a good word for how your educators are feeling about this program that you're implementing across the country. But Lee, I'm gonna jump in here with you and talk a little bit. So we had a roundtable discussion. That was one of the things that Cobert, Colorado Business Roundtable, got really excited to work with you guys on. And that was earlier this month. But I want to talk about why we had the roundtable.
Well, it's all about collective impact and working together. And one of the primary objectives, obviously, is to be able to share the research with educators and business leaders and higher ed and other stakeholders on what's happening with soft skills and the importance. We mentioned earlier that 92% of employers rank them as important or as important, if not more, than the technical skills sometimes, and also educators. And so we want to make sure that we share that research and have that common knowledge. Second, it's important for us to be able to elevate and bring awareness at the roundtable of the power of AVID and the effect it's having nationally in this area in terms of college and career readiness and a solution to many of the challenges that businesses face. And then the third, of course, is then to be able to work together to look at where do we go from here? How can we continue to build on these opportunities so that more students can benefit and ultimately feed in and create a workforce that can compete in a global economy in an environment where America is less than 5% of the workforce on the planet. So competing globally is really key when it comes to workforce development.
Agreed. Competing globally is that's no longer an option anymore. You don't just get into international affairs. With the birth of the internet and the more the technology grows, you're inevitably going to need to compete on a global market. That being said,
when you think of those.
Oh, please, yes.
No, I was just thinking when you think of those numbers that we're about 20 million people in the U.S., but there's 7.3 billion out there, and China has more honors kids than we even have kids. Preparing our kids to keep America strong, our economy strong, and our workforce strong is, as I mentioned earlier, central to our national security.
It is very central. And talking about that, one thing that we did notice is that we didn't make this event public on our page. A lot of people couldn't sign up for it. It was kind of an invite only. And the reason behind that is because we wanted very specific people in the room. We needed business leaders, the correct type of policymakers and legislators, as well as educators to come to these roundtables. That is something that I know that is definitely a part of what you want to do with AVID, but why is it so important to get those correct leaders in the door for these roundtables, Sandy?
I think it's because we're so busy with the work that we're doing and what's in front of us. And because we're so busy, it's sometimes hard to slow down and to broaden our perspective as to what the impact is of the outcome of our organizations on the overall state, on the overall community. And so as educators, you're passionate about student achievement and making sure educators are supported. Businesses need to make sure that they're providing great service and great products and that they're aligned with community values. And of course, policymakers play also a very critical role. Colorado has the advantage of being the hub of several policy centers for the nation. ECS, Education Commission of the States, I would say probably at least a majority of the higher education policy groups are located in Colorado as well. So when you call a roundtable in Colorado and you can bring in folks from the state policy level, folks that are impacting the national policy level, the great business leaders that have a thriving economy in Colorado and want to do better. And then you add the perspective of what's going on with the student demographic. What are some of the things inside school districts that are helping us make sure that all children are successful, and what are the things that are hindering us? And if you can have that conversation over multiple time periods for an amount of time where you're not interrupted, like a roundtable discussion, with a commitment to come back over and over again and to look at the data, to think about what's been working, best practices from research, some of the core lessons that are leading researchers to think more about soft skills gap, where the successes are inside Colorado schools, where the challenges are, and then to specifically call out the partnerships that are making a big difference. That's a powerful conversation, and I know no matter what state leaders work in, if someone will give them the opportunity to expand their horizon by participating in that, we eagerly clear our calendar to make sure we're there.
Yeah. And everyone benefits when you think about the challenges and opportunities that schools face as a human service provider. There's no single human service provider, including the public schools, that has the wherewithal to meet all the needs that students bring and communities need and businesses need. And so by working together to be able to affect that in a positive and powerful way is really critical. And Fanny alluded to the Nike. When you think about the effect that Nike had in terms of investing in AVID in Oregon and the difference it made in terms of student outcomes, college readiness, where those funds are going away, and you have school districts that are funding now AVID permanently because of the positive effect in graduation rates and GPA and college entrance, is a great example of the synergy that can be created through these partnerships and making the educational experience relevant not only to the students, but to the community and the workforce.
Awesome.
And Alex, I might mention another advantage that Colorado has. We have an amazing board that serves for AVID, and two of those board members are located in Colorado. One is Monty Moses, who he retired, but he has had an amazing career in multiple school districts, ending in the Cherry Creek School District, not only as a leader in Colorado, but recognized as the National Superintendent of the Year. And then Matt Gianeschi, who is our vice chair currently of the AVID board. He has served for a couple of different Colorado governors in the area of higher education and partnering with businesses, and is very active in these conversations. And I'm not sure that Matt is going to be able to attend, but he's been instrumental, as Monty has, in bringing folks to the table to be sure that everyone knows the power of having the conversation and what results are going on so we can learn better from each other.
Yes, and learning from each other is absolutely key when you're going at this together. I want to focus a little bit on what you've already been able to accomplish here in Colorado.
What would you like to know about some of the successes from Colorado specifically? Would that be helpful?
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Great. I'll let Lee take that.
Well, we have over 20 years impacting the Colorado districts and schools, and our goals in the process have been to accelerate the underachieving students and all students who have potential into more rigorous courses, to be able to teach those academic and social skills that may not be targeted in other classes. We also provide intensive support with in-class tutors and strong student-teacher relationships that we talked about earlier in terms of students being able to solve problems, construct their own knowledge, work with their peers to solve problems, and creating that positive peer group for students. But also that belief system, that personal sense of hope and personal achievement and hard work and determination that is so important in both the educational workspace as well as the workforce. We're in 24 districts, about 123 sites, growing as we speak. Most of those are secondary, but we also are in the elementary level where schools and districts are saying, we really shouldn't be waiting till the high school experience to give our kids these power skills. And so more and more schools in Colorado and nationally are adding, moving AVID into their elementary schools. When you think about the students we serve, over half of them meet free reduced lunch eligibility, which the definition of socioeconomically disadvantaged. Close to 15,000 students, almost half of those are Latino or Hispanic, then white, and then black and other mixed. And so you can see that the demographics mirror the emerging demographics that we see nationally. We have 4 national demonstration schools, and these are schools where others come to see AVID, the AVID experience, and once they see it, they really get excited and, of course, want to go back and do AVID in their schools. And so those national demonstration schools are great places for schools in Colorado to go see the power of AVID. And then, of course, we mentioned earlier that when you think about all of those sites and the students at the secondary level, 93% in Colorado completing 4-year entrance college requirements, and then 85 going on to apply to a 4-year university, and 81% of those who apply being accepted. So I think it's the power of the AVID effect is really underscored by the diversity, if you will, the wonderful diversity in our schools, and leveling the playing field for all kids, so that you and I and others, where education's been good to us, gives us a lot of choices in our lives, and we want all of our kids to have the choices in their lives that we've had in ours, because education was good to us.
The only thing I would like to add to that, Alex, is that the way that we network across a state or a region, we're able to serve and support school districts as large as Cherry Creek, Jefferson County, Denver Public Schools. We also are very interested in supporting schools that have less student population, but just as powerful of an impact on the community, like Telluride and Inglewood. And you've got a group of those leaders who understand how important that network is, so that the profession can learn from each other, can share best practices, and can impact businesses and industries in more remote areas of a state as well as more populated areas of a state.
I just want to underscore that, as a national nonprofit, AVID's growth in large part has been word of mouth. People have seen what AVID kids do and hearing about it from their fellow principals or teachers, and then wanting to expand it. So that's been an important part of its success.
That is interesting that word of mouth has been the #1 way to help you grow. That being said, I would love to help spread the word here for you guys and make sure that we're implementing this change. So how do we make sure, as perhaps parents and students, that we can do that? Obviously, you've got these programs, and you can certainly set up with business leaders and educators to make sure that those go to the right schools. But as a parent, how can I implement this change as well?
I think it's engaging frequently with the school, so that at a very early age, you understand the school system and know how to navigate when your child's needs are being met, or more importantly, if they're not being met. And then to stay active if you can, participating in any opportunity the school gives you. And if your work or life situation doesn't allow you to do that, to make sure that you communicate to the school the best way for them to reach you, whether it's through a text system or maybe an alternative time of the day for a face-to-face interaction. I've always been a strong believer, and will continue to be, that when you can open up the doors and have businesses and parents come into school, see what's going on, you not only get a very strong level of public support, which is what you desire, you also get a different level of awareness about what you can do at home or through internships to support young people becoming even more productive and building as Lee said, contributing to democracy.
I want to talk also about if I am a business leader, how can I get involved with AVID? What are the avenues that you have? Obviously, you are a nonprofit organization. You are a 501c3, so you will accept a check if need be. But how else can I get involved? Is there a way? Do you have a business liaison? What information do I need for my business audience?
So we do have a small but a powerful business development arena inside of AVID. And I will just mention that as a nonprofit, we have had folks that have contributed. But what's been more powerful is that when they work with their local leaders, like the Dell Foundation did in Wisconsin, in Texas, or other executive leaders here at AVID. We happen to be located in San Diego, but I mentioned before I lived in Colorado a long time. That does not make us unhappy at all to get on a plane and go visit friends and educators and business leaders that would like to have a follow-up conversation.
Common interest sends a powerful message to the community, to the schools, creates synergy, and I think it sends a really important message to our kids that these people from the community care about them.
Yeah. You know, we don't often get this request, but we would definitely respond to it very, very quickly. Absolutely. If you had a business in Colorado that wanted us to come in and speak with their executive team, bring some teachers, some kids, to help them understand the power of high expectations, access to rigor, and the soft skills development that they are getting in their schools, we would organize that and make that happen and be very happy to do so.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I just want to share one of the great things about being part of AVID and a nonprofit is our primary metric for success is a social one. It's reaching more students. It's making sure that more kids have the opportunity of the AVID effect so that they can go on to a career through college and something that can not only help them, it's a game changer for the kids and for their families and the community.
It definitely is, and you guys are doing some wonderful work, and hopefully I would like to get this message out there that we can get some of those Colorado businesses on board to start implementing more of this through more counties in Colorado, districts, I should say.
The other two things that I think might be of good interest to your business leaders is what I mentioned in the last broadcast about expanding digital teaching and learning practices. So even though the soft skills we may picture it always face-to-face, there's a lot of ways of using digital sources to build those face-to-face contacts, how to collaborate and how to problem solve, how to do higher level questions through a digital format in addition to a face-to-face office format. And our newest initiative, which is quite exciting, is we're currently developing a STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and math, and we could add STEAM and add the arts in there, which I think knowing the businesses in Colorado would be very interesting to them about how we make sure that we're supporting students in dreaming about those careers, thinking about it early on, especially underrepresented groups of students who may not traditionally see themselves in that type of a career. So that we give those exposures as early as elementary school and then provide the academic and the internship opportunities they need to be sure that they can exit post-secondary education, whether it's a career tech school or a four-year university or a postgraduate degree, and that when they get to the workforce, they're so happy with their success in those businesses that they do want to stay and help grow this footprint in Colorado.
I would only add, a theme that the Colorado Roundtable event represents is, as AVID has grown historically over the last almost 40 years now by word of mouth, what you're seeing more and more is looking at more systems-level approaches, looking at working with districts, with regions, with states, to be able to spread the AVID effect to more and more students.
Very well said. Where can I find more information?
AVID.org, AIVD.org.
Awesome. Very simply said, and that's a great site to have. We have just a few minutes here left, and one of the things that I love to do with my guests that are in education or in workforce development areas is ask you, if you weren't in the career that you're in, what would you be doing? Sandy, I'll start with you.
I can't imagine being in any other career other than what I've done. I've had great rewards in terms of outcomes. It is always a challenge. You know, the goal is to work out hard enough or to go to work and make it challenging enough that you can tell that you've done something good that day, but not so hard that you get discouraged. Honestly, I wouldn't trade this career for anything.
I have to say ditto. I was one of those kids, first generation, whose high school counselors told me I wasn't college material. I should go do construction work. And it didn't matter that I had the highest math scores in my class, but I was a stereotype. But it was a game changer for me, education. It really changed my life. And so, like Sandy, I can't imagine doing anything else. It's about how do you help others to be able to have those opportunities. And education is a great equalizer.
Well, clearly you guys are in the right field that you're in if you're so dedicated that you can't see yourself elsewhere. I love that for both of you. And thank you both so much for joining me on Connect and Collaborate today.
Thank you, Alex.
Been a joy, Alex.
Thank you. And once again, be sure to check out this podcast and more at cobrt.com/radio-podcast. Like and subscribe our YouTube page while you're here. And be sure to visit avid.org. That's AVID.org. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.